I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Lisa Stanley. I'm Lloyd Stanley's daughter. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to the meeting to discuss the Monrovia Town Center. There have been numerous public hearings before the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners on the Monrovia Town Center. At the last Board of County Commissioner meeting held in January on the project, the Commissioners voted to approve our plan with some conditions. At the suggestion of the county, tonight we are here to present those conditions or changes that have been made to our plan, and also to give you the opportunity to ask questions about our plan. I'd like to introduce the team members who are present this evening. Noel Manalo from Miles and Southbridge, Dave Ager, who's the land planner with Townscape Design, Joe Calagero with the Traffic Group, Chris Smoriga, engineer with Harrison Smoriga, and Roy Stanley, the applicant for the Monrovia Town Center project. Also here tonight is Dennis Superzinski in the back. He is with the Frederick County Community Development Division and is the principal planner for the county for the project. He's here to respond to any questions that you may have regarding the county process and reviewing the PUD, or Plan Unit Development, and the DRRA, which is Developer Rights and Responsibilities Agreement. Just some considerations to keep in mind for tonight's meeting. We only have the room from 6 to 7:30. We ask that you hold your questions until all the speakers are finished, and we will take questions one at a time. We ask that you raise your hand to be recognized if you have a question. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Dave Ager.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I was asked to keep my comments short so that we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So, Joe, if you could just advance it one slide. Just to put things in context, what we're talking about is the Monrovia Town Center. This is a county master plan. The areas in yellow are the areas that are recommended for low-density residential and public water and sewer in the master plan. The reds are commercial, and so this is the property right here that we're going to be talking about tonight. It's within the larger Monrovia growth area. Next slide, please.
Does that include the commercial area that you?
Good question. What we're going to be discussing tonight is not the commercial area, it's the area adjacent to it. I'll orient you on this map as well. I'll step back a little bit. This is Route 75, I'm sorry, Route 80, and then Route 75 up through the north-south right here. And the property we're talking about is what's rendered in color here. Everything west of this power line right here. This is a revised plan that was prepared and resubmitted to the county based upon the commissioner's approval of the previous plan with the recommendation for changes. And those changes include, there was a reduction in the number of units from 1510 to 1250. There was a elimination of anything considered multifamily. There's no multifamily allowed in this plan whatsoever. We do have townhouses in the plan, but they're limited to 30% of the total of the 1250, so we can't exceed that number. I mean the 30%. There was a connection in the master plan that we had shown out to Weller Road. There was a lot of discussion during the hearings. Planning Commission recommended against it. The commissioners have recommended that we eliminate, or our approval says we have to eliminate that, so we've eliminated that. There is no connection to Weller Road. In addition to that, there was a requirement that 50% of the units have to be age restricted, and 50% of the units are available to an all-age community. So essentially half of the community is age restricted now. Now that has had several benefits to the larger community. One is there's been a fairly significant reduction in the number of school-age children that are going to be generated from the community. And there's been a reduction in both the AM and PM peak hour trips from a traffic standpoint. So the reduction in total units and the change from units that are all age to age restricted has had that reduction in those trips and student population. Let me just walk you through the plan. The areas in green.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Could we dim the lights so we can see all of
Oh,
them?
sure, absolutely. If someone knows how to dim the lights. I apologize. Thank you.
More. Thank you.
All right. One thing I failed to mention is there was a reduction in the total area of the site as well. So there's no longer, the properties in the original proposal, the properties that were on the east side of this power line were included in the PUD. They are no longer in the PUD, but they're still, the developer is still going to be providing the school and the park site, but he's not getting any density off of that area. It's been excluded from the PUD. So the PUD line stops at the power line. In addition to that, there was a parcel over here that's part of the dragway, we excluded that from it as well. So there's been an area reduction, number of units reduction, and a change in the mix and the character of the units. So, Joe, if you could flip to the next slide. What we've come up with and what we think is a very good plan is the idea and the concept of 3 neighborhoods. We've labeled them 1, 2, and 3 here, each with their own individual recreation component, so that they actually, that's a neighborhood with its own localized recreational component. This one happens to be associated with Stream Valley. This middle area here is another community with its own recreational component centrally located close to the commercial area that's adjacent to the PUD. And then on the western portion of the site, on the high point, is the 3rd recreational component. What we also did was we worked on a project currently under construction in Delaware. And what we've done is we've introduced the concept of phasing the recreational communities. In some age-restricted communities, you'll see a large clubhouse being built, substantial clubhouse right up front. What the newer trend is to kind of phase that in over time. And so we've used that concept here, and we were phasing in the age-restricted components, recreation and clubhouse components, which are part of the approval requirement, into 2 areas. So we have 2 distinct areas that are age-restricted, and one area in the center here, closest to the commercial activity, that is all age.
They're required by law to be contiguous for an restricted.
No. You can have separate projects.
We're going to keep all questions and
Questions
comments
to
to the
the
end,
end,
please.
Can I ask a question about the map? It's just, is that red line on the far side of 1 a road, or is it just a boundary?
Just right here.
Yes.
That is Ed McLean Road. This is the Lansdale property right here.
Okay,
It is
that's what
also
I,
the boundary of the property.
thank you.
Next slide. This is a blow-up of the area closest to the commercial area. One of the things we just wanted to indicate is there is a site plan that's been submitted on the general commercial, and it has kind of a Main Street concept. And this, we have an integrated connectivity to that street through all 3 of these communities, so they're interconnected, and as well as an interconnection with the collector road. Show the next slide. This is a plan we've turned you 90 degrees. This is 75, the relocation is 75, north is to your left, south is to your right. This is the dragway, this is 80. And so this indicates the existing road comes down and has a skewed connection here and then picks up again over here. So this shows the relocation and the 90-degree intersection with Route 80 and the extension of that improvement down to existing 75 to the south. Next slide. And this is an overall plan showing the locations and the types of either extra improvements or road improvements that are being required by the project. There's a list here on here. Again, question and answer period, Joe Caladeros will answer questions if you have some on that. As you can see that there's several improvements at the community itself, and there's several improvements in the greater region as far as traffic improvements.
I can't hear you, please speak up.
I'm sorry. This plan indicates several improvements, traffic improvements that are required. It's kind of a key plan by this project. This really hasn't changed from the original approval, notwithstanding the fact it's been reduced in scale. Next slide, Joe. All right. A little off center, but questions and answers.
Where is this information available? Is it available on the internet?
There is information, these plans have been submitted with the county and are available at the county, as well as the supporting documents.
So does that mean to see if we have to do it as a Winchester Hall to submit a request?
Dennis, are they on the
Well,
website?
Mr. Mr. Stanley would like to show them, make them available, that's really up to him, or Mr. Manalo can talk to you.
And everything that's submitted to the county for this project, to my understanding, is being posted to a particular page on the county website. Confirm that.
We've had a continuous presence of at least the main portions of the concept plan. There's a project summary. Some of the material is up there. If there's something that's not online you'd like to see that's in the deeper packet, we can make that available as well.
Ms. Green?
Is there connection to Ed McLean?
Yes,
Are you aware that that's not a two-lane road all the way down?
there's a connection, maybe we should put this up. Well, there's a, yeah, maybe we do that, see what that does. But there is a connection across from the Lansdale community. Right here, can you see that? Right there, a little small from the back of the room. The county has suggested or asked us to show potential locations or connections along Edmund Plain Road to be determined at phase 2. So those are not committed to at this point. The only connection is here and a potential connection, very here. In this location, a potential connection to the north. But those were requested of us by the county. The only one we proposed, this one here, opposite the entrance to Lansdale.
Okay, yeah, because we drove down it the other day and it's not very drivable, especially if there's a car coming in the other direction.
The road will, you know, if there was improvements here, it would have to be, if it was to be used by traffic, it would have to be improved. So it wouldn't remain in conditions.
Yeah, you were talking about, road improvements on Route 75.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, in order to do that, how much property are you gonna be taking away from the people who live there on Route 75?
Joe, can you answer that?
That has not been determined yet. The alignment has been presented to the State Highway Administration. They have not approved that alignment yet. So it is going to be a long process to get that final alignment completed.
As someone who lives right there on Route 75, that's a major concern to me,
Understood.
you know?
Understood. It's a long process. And it's going to have to be approved again. It's going to be approved and worked through with the State Highway Administration.
Okay.
You mentioned that the age restricted, limited traffic on 75. How young is the age restricted? Because you realize people over 55 commute to work.
Yeah, there is, as compared to, and Joe can answer more specific, but generally as compared to an all-age community, they have less trips as a general rule.
So she's wondering just where you're setting that age limit, is it 55, 60?
Yeah, because people at work are 65 and older.
Right, no, exactly. The covenants, for, again, as nominal miles and stoppers, the covenants will be set for 55. So again, to your point, there's certainly clearly users of that age bracket that are still driving.
Yes.
And Joe's can speak to this, but not in addition to the unit decrease, there's a trip generation that's based on age restricted versus market. And I guess this is the way the trip generation works for age restricted, it's a lower generation.
And have you done trip generation at earlier times in the day?
I'm still under county code, which is 7 to 9 instead of 6.
So in the front?
Thank you. The age restricted is going to be split across on both sides of 2, which is the full age, and 3 is sitting next to the high school. All right, there would be a lot of traffic having to cut through the age restriction in order to get to school, especially if it's the high school, there's a lot of students driving through it.
No, the way it's laid out, the main connection from the west side to the high school is basically along the property line with the residential, with the commercial community. So the age restricted is kind of offset from that situation. And then this is not necessarily interconnected to Weller Road. There are pathway connections, and there is a potential for a connection up here to be determined by the county when and if they develop that community park.
Sir in the back?
Yeah, as far as what you propose to do with Route 75 south of 8, I know it hasn't been approved yet. Is it going to intersect with any part of 75 that's existing now? when you're coming from that, you're talking about coming straight ahead down 75 from 8, correct? Your
Yes, you
proposal.
shouldn't have to.
Yeah, where's
Okay, now, my concern is, at what point where your proposal is now, of course, I understand that hasn't been approved.
Correct.
At what point would your proposal now have 75 intersecting with existing 75?
We'll call it up on the map and try to give you a general idea. It's on the far right-hand side of the screen. It's like, we don't have a mile marker or anything like that.
Well, I'll say north or south of Windsor Road.
I'd have to look to see what that small street is.
That's Lawson Road,
Yes.
and the parking lot in gray is the store.
All right, Lawson Road is about a mile from Windsor Road. From Windsor Road, you're coming north on 75, you've got a long uphill grade, about 60-degree uphill grade. All right, the problem we're seeing on the map is it doesn't look as steep as a hill. That's where I'm asking, is it gonna be before that or after that?
It's too early to tell you at this time. It's-
No, I'm saying, as to what your proposal is, I understand it hasn't been approved yet, but what you've
So we-
proposed so far.
So right now, we're looking at a two-dimensional conceptual design, and at the time that the state approves the alignment will be approved based on the horizontal and vertical curves, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then the new road will have to be designed in accordance with all the new standards that the state allows.
All right, and that's taking priority safety?
Yes.
Okay, because I live at
Safety
the
will
top
be
of that
considered.
hill, and right now I have to screech out my driveway, and I got a circular driveway, and I'm threatening to be hit anytime. Now, with 2 more lanes coming through, I'm gonna be dead in a month. If your proposal goes through and, the lanes, it's proposed and it's proposed
Again, we'll
more
work-
than me.
Again, this is a 2D preliminary conceptual design, and we still have to go through the State Highway Administration process. This road is gonna be owned and maintained by the Maryland State Highway Administration, so we have to construct it in accordance with their standards and their approval. And that's all I have for you, that's all I have for you at this time.
Oh, look, can I ask you a question? Does the public have any input to the state as far as their approval or disapproval?
I'm not sure how that's gonna work through the approval process. I can't give you that answer.
There's 2 federal regulations that concern age-restricted communities. That's HOPA, that's the Housing for Older Persons Act of 1995, and then there's also HUD. Now, it's my understanding, I did some research on the internet today, that as far as continuity, it says that the rules state that the communities have to be contiguous. In the case of apartments, they must all be in a building or series of buildings away from other parts of the development that allow all ages. Active adult communities can be the sole entity of a master plan, or they can be part of a master plan community. If they are part of a larger community, the parcel on which they are located must be separate from the other parcels and contiguous. So does that meet that requirement?
Yes.
How?
There's 2 contiguous parcels, it doesn't mean it's one active adult community.
So you have,
They can be separate communities with separate HOAs.
so you have 2 separate adult communities, is what you're saying?
Physically separate, that's correct.
Now, each adult community by law has to be marketed to separately, only seniors. So you're gonna have 3 marketing plans for this? One for each senior community and one for the regular community?
It's gonna be phased over
I'm
time.
talking about the marketing, when you sell these homes to people by law, it has to be marketed specifically to
We'll be
seniors.
following the law when we market the property.
Okay. What are the laws with respect to age requirements and how that's determined and how it's validated?
Well, it's in our covenant, no one wants.
Yeah, so the county code essentially codifies those, in those specific statutes you were referencing, it codifies the requirements for the covenants. I don't have the section off the top of my head, but it's within the zoning ordinance. So what we have to submit as an applicant when we're looking for an approval of age restricted is essentially a draft of those covenants so that those can be evaluated against the zoning ordinance, which again mirrors the requirements for those federal regulations. And those have been submitted to the county as part of the revisions requested by the board.
What are the federal regulations requiring certain percentages?
Can you see that, please?
Percentages? Yes. If you have an age-restricted community, what percent of those people have to be 55 within that community?
I'm not sure.
All right, it's 80%. It's 80%.
80%.
80%. And there can't be
One
anybody.
member of the family.
One member has to.
Oh, I see, within a unit, okay, sorry, I thought you were talking about the overall community.
Okay. And then the requirements are that the community has to submit affidavits every 2 years. And they have to do, the affidavit is based on birth certificates,
Correct.
driver's license, military IDs and all that. So how are we gonna have assurance that the community is going to be able to audit these people and figure that out?
Just like with every other age-restricted community that's approved by the county, the covenants, that's the enforceable document for that codifies those requirements.
Do they exist?
That's they don't exist, I mean, there's a draft that has, if the community's approved, and the draft of the covenants is approved by the county, then before we can go forward, those will have to be recorded in land records. And the effect that has is those become enforceable. The covenants set forth that the developer and the property owner reserve the right to give the HOA certain enforcement mechanisms, which you mentioned some as far as documentation, affidavits, what have you. But again, if the covenants, the covenants have to pass muster and have to hit all of those requirements that you mentioned.
Are those draft covenants available for us?
They've been submitted to the county as well, yes.
In the blue,
Could you explain the rationale of intersecting the age-restricted parcels with an all-age in the middle? I love being a grandmother, but, I think they should be together, so what was the rationale by putting them separately like that?
Each, the approval calls for half of the total units to be age restricted.
Right.
We have the flexibility to put them in different locations as we see fit. Each of those two areas are large enough to support their own individual community center and community amenities. The other thing we thought was not to have them located immediately adjacent to the commercial, but rather to have them associated with the more of the pastoral parts of the property, which are in the northern portion where there's more stream valleys. So that was one thing. The other thing is that those portions also had less through traffic than the areas closest to the commercial. So that was another reason for that. And then the phasing, which we mentioned earlier, we think is an appropriate mechanism for us to phase this project given the approval. So we're looking at two separate communities from that standpoint. The other thing is, not everybody in an age-restricted community wants complete separation. Some do, some don't. And the physical plan, the way we've designed it, allows for both to happen, but not to preclude one or the other. So we're trying to market to a larger community.
Do I get to ask another question, Can I? What's going to happen with the property on the other side of the power line?
That property is we didn't put the slide up, but there was a public use plan that was presented. That hasn't changed. Those are still going to be provided to the county as public use sites. So they're going to be dedicated over to the county. And there's been talk about it being a community park and a potential high school site. But that's to be determined by the county.
Okay, so is it right under the power lines though?
No, the property is adjacent to the
But
property.
it's so close, the high school would be, right? Wouldn't that be too close for
Well,
kids?
the conceptual plan that we laid out, that was presented to the county and was shown on our concept plan, showed several hundred feet of separation between the building and the power line easement, and then the power line itself is within that easement.
It's not.
So it's essentially close to a football field.
No, it's not.
So, you're talking about this age-restricted community, and the kind of enforceable age limit idea. Are there gonna be, within the covenant, is there anything that will enforce that children under a certain age are not allowed to reside with the residents there, so that that doesn't contribute to the schools?
Yes, that's a specific requirement for the covenants, and so it's specifically spelled out. I believe it's the specific language, 18 or younger, is prohibited, and it specifically references impact to the schools to prevent that, but it does also obviously contemplate that, there'll be visitors, but no residents.
And then one more question, what kind of piggybacking on that, you said that it's a two-dimensional kind of concept plan, and I'm just trying to figure out, since there's a height restriction on the development that's gonna go in there, what kind of a concept, are you talking about? Are you talking about like villa kind of age restriction, or, do you know what I mean? Is it gonna be like one massive unit, or?
No, not at all. It's not that, if you recall, we mentioned that the county approval has a restriction on 30% of the total units being townhouses. What we've conceptually looked at is a unit for the age restricted that's a wider attached product for that portion, for their portion of that attached unit that's wider, to allow the bedrooms, the master bedroom to be on the first floor. So if that's what you're referring to as a villa, then there will be some, we do have kind of planning some of those in there. And if you look back at, I can flip back to one of the other plans, we had to show, part of the requirement for the submittal to show the location and number, and we did that on the plan. And so we've roughly evenly distributed the attached product, which are the townhouses, and what you refer to as a villa for the age restricted in each of the three communities. So they're not all in one place.
So the height of the townhouse would be how many stories do you?
Well, to be determined, but it would, be probably 2 stories, but to be determined, so don't quote me on it. And there's, that's the age restricted, then they're all age, you can be taller. And we've located them closer to the commercial, so they're down to kind of a downtown type of design.
Similar to like what we're looking at in Urbana, or is that?
Well, the revision is 3 stories, but again, we haven't specified that, that'll be determined at phase 2.
There's a couple seats up front if anybody wants to take a seat up here. Teddy?
Will the covenant be finished, before the approval? I think it's important that the community be able to see it.
It's available now in draft form.
Okay.
No, certainly, any input through the approval process of the review of these revisions will be taken into consideration and edited as necessary.
Okay, it's available for everybody here to be able to look at it.
Yeah, it was part of the submission of the revisions.
Okay.
Yes.
In the back, in the gray sweatshirt?
So you're saying that as far as the design fee is restricted, it will not be a single story or single story basement, but it would rather be 2-story with the second floor?
No, what I was saying is that we haven't determined that yet. We're not including some 2-story units from the plan, but we haven't determined that yet. But what I did say was that we had planned, when we made the revisions, we planned in a wider attached unit. Again, it's a very limited number of these in the community. That would be wider to allow for the bedroom to be on the first floor, not upstairs. So potentially it could be a 1-story unit, but it could be a second and third bedroom upstairs, and make it 2-story. It's not been determined.
Will the topography of land do walkouts?
In some cases, the topography will allow some walkouts, yeah.
I mean, the vast majority of the topography of the terrain over there would provide for walkouts without any issue. Regrading to put all the alleyways and things like that in the village.
I'm not sure I heard.
Can you speak up? They turn the fans on, so it's hard to hear.
So the topography of the terrain on those properties would easily allow for walkouts. I don't know what will happen with any regrading to provide for the alleyways and the parking structures behind the properties as was mentioned in the original plan.
Well, in some areas, the topography would allow that, would be more appropriate. In some areas, it wouldn't be. So, it's our goal not to overly grade the site. We're going to try and put the unit of the type that fits with the topography.
In the gray?
I was wondering what the logic is behind putting an age-restricted development next to the high school, so that all the high school students would either have to drive, adding more congestion, or walk through the age-restricted property. And I'm sure that everybody that's 55 and over is going to love the noise from the school. Now, what was the logic behind that? Instead of putting the age-restricted group together or the not restricted group together?
I think Dave already touched on that.
Yeah, but it didn't make any sense to my question. So what was the logic beside putting it by the high school instead of on the other side of, over by Lansdale, for example?
We looked at several different options, and we each determined that is an appropriate way to lay it out. It's actually immediately adjacent to the park. So there's a park there too, and there's a significant amount of open space associated with that eastern site.
You mean the power line?
No, open space within the PUD. And adjacent on the public use side. There's nearly 27 acres of dedicated land for a park that's immediately adjacent to the PUD. So that's there as well. So there's several natural and recreational communities, facilities in that general area.
And you
In
thought
addition to
that-
what we're proposing internally for the age-restricted community.
So that to you made more sense than the age difference and the quality of life difference in terms of day-to-day noise and traffic?
Well, like I said, we looked at several different options, and we determined that that was the most favorable option from the development of the property.
So the lesser of two evils.
No, I didn't say that. It was better to locate the age-restricted more to the northern portion of the Fingerwood property and down at the intersection with the commercial. So we tried to do that, and we actually separated by doing that. But we also phased the communities into two separate communities with their own internalized recreation amenities that are scaled to that community, meeting the requirements of the zone and the APFO.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Stanley at least for conducting this meeting. And second of all, my only problem, and I think the bottom line here, sir, is the APFO in our area just can't handle the type of development we're talking about. And the problem is, it's not your development necessarily. It's one, how the county let anyone know. You lost your opportunity to sell it to the community by not involving us at an earlier stage. And the only thing that bothers me about this meeting, one is the number of unknowns, and two, this isn't really input, the plan's been made, and how is it going to change by what we said? And the plans and all that. For instance, I'll give you one example of a bad idea. Don't put the commercial area right at the intersection of 75 and 80. Why would you want to have a congestion point at that place? It seems to me you'd want to move it as far away from that intersection because you're going to increase the number of pulling out and pulling in, and that's going to be very disruptive to traffic itself.
Golden Mile number two.
It's a statement more than anything.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but
And
that's our biggest concern here.
Sure, and I guess to speak to the input that that the BOCC had asked us to have this meeting to solicit more input, we're certainly, I'm saying taking that.
Okay, my question then is,
That's
how will this input change the plan?
Just to let me
If
finish.
we don't like it.
The comments related to the proximity of age restricted to the other, to the other surrounding. The proximity of the age restricted to the other aspects of the community, specifically the schools, is certainly something that, we're taking note that these are things that you as the neighborhood is raising. And what we'll do, again, obviously, is look at the plan that we've submitted. It's all still subject to public hearing and review by the Planning Commission. I think that those are certainly valid points to consider. just to sort of follow up on what Mr. Ager was saying, there, you know, when we were looking at all the different options, there are multiple ways to market an age-restricted community, and it's interesting in Mr. Ager's experience, there are instances where communities do actually like that interface. So you were balancing a lot of factors, obviously the proximity to the parks, to the other amenities, but certainly give us all of your concerns. We're not, you're not speaking in a vacuum, I guess is what I wanted to say.
I appreciate
And also
that.
to the APFL point, which again is obviously a well-taken, valid point. I mean, this is.
I mean, we're gonna have to live with this for 20
Exactly.
to 30 years.
Well, and
until
again,
the roads are improved.
you know,
That's the hard
Mr. Stanley, the project is not in any way trying to obviously get around or get away from any of the requirements of adequate public facilities. And I would note that by virtue of this now being 50% age restricted, and by lowering the unit count, we are sort of, you know, clearly the decision makers have been hearing the input and, you know, come back, again, this certainly isn't our first choice to knock back from 1,510 market rate units. We're taking a pretty big hit, not only in the units, but the
How many in this room want this project to happen?
Bring out the cleaning.
The point though is, had we discussed this earlier, you could have sold us something. You know what I mean?
Thank you for your comment. Next question.
I'll take you in the back with the, next week burgundy jacket.
I want to go back and revisit Ed McLean, and could someone explain to me why both Lansdale and this proposed development are going to have access to Ed McLean, and what is in place to keep traffic from going northbound on Ed McLean, which is a lane and a half maximum? I happen to live on Ed McLean, so I have a personal interest in that as well. And what's going to keep the cut-through traffic that is going to Baltimore or wherever coming southbound on 75 from cutting through Ed McLean, which currently is a major cut-through road? And over the past week, I've had 4 tractor trailers, 18-wheelers on Ed McLean Road because they can't make the bridge. And Lansdale is supposed to not have construction traffic on there, but there's no enforcement for that. So why is Ed McLean not included in a look at traffic for this development?
Blaine doesn't have to drive on.
It's all based on the county's decision, you know.
Blame it on somebody.
But you know, that's
I understand.
that's not an answer.
I know. I'm not sure what you would like me to tell you. I'm just giving you the answer. I know a lot of people don't like our answers, but they're the answers that we have. Unfortunately,
So
we've been asked to connect. Thank you. Yes.
The county's right here. Can the county give me some reason why?
Well, I don't represent the county, but I can represent, you know, staff, and I can tell you a little bit about the reasoning behind it. If the choice is, well, Lansdale's happening, you know, there's no doubt about that.
I know.
That is through the
Unfortunately,
gate.
I know that.
Right, so what we're talking about is this project, and what we'd rather see is that connection between the two communities than cordoning it off and saying no access to Ed McLean Road at all. We have the major connection point between these two communities happens across Ed McLean Road.
With appears to be a circle?
That
Or,
phase two. I mean, you know, it's showing a crossing,
So are you figuring that there's going to be no traffic going north on Ed McLean or doing
No.
a cut through from 75?
No, I would never say it. The same way that there's cut-throughs happening now. No one's going to sit here and say there's not going to be any
So
cut-through.
why doesn't a project address that?
How does it not address that?
What are you doing for Ed McLean?
Tell me one thing, where does 75 come back out on, 75 come back out on the old 75 at? Once they put the bridge in over the railroad.
That is at a conceptual point. The question was, where does 75 come back onto old 75? How the 75 interchange with 70 is dealt with is a much bigger project, and in part, these folks will be helping to fund that.
Yes, but is it gonna be widened all the way from there, from 70, let's say, all the way to 80 or even, I mean, down past 80, all the way to 355? Is it going to be
There's-
widened all the way or what? In
I
the
don't-
future?
What, could you?
Beyond where it comes back and joins back to 75.
Yeah, that's what I want, really concerned
The
about.
number one priority of the county in terms of transportation projects is the 75 corridor, which includes not only the 8-mile length between this community and 355, where 75 joins
Yeah.
up, but includes the interchange 270 on the south and the interchange with 70 on the north. That's not a project that's going to happen as a result of this decision today. It's a much,
No, but
much
until you
longer
can tell
range
me, I'm not going to be satisfied with just about any of your answers until you can tell me for sure where it's going to come back out on the 75.
It's not been determined yet.
Because you've got you've got some dead hills in there that you cannot see traffic coming at you.
I'm sure, and if transportation planning was done in that way, if we had things pre-engineered for any possibility that came down the road, it would be an incredibly difficult process to handle. Somebody asked a question earlier about what the public input process would be to that 75 improvement. And the State Highway Administration, when they have a project moving its way through the system, one of the first things they do is they have a public meeting set up where they show you alternatives for possibilities for a particular project. It's much later down the road. That's after they've done their conceptual planning. It's not at that point yet. It is far down the road. And I guess the response to you would be this. It clearly matters to you how that connection is made.
Yes, it does.
I cannot answer that, and they cannot answer that right
With
now.
turning tractor and trailers around just about every day, it does.
People are shouting out, I will call on you, please.
Can I just make sure that my question, you're done? That was the answers?
Well, we had another question.
With Ed McLean?
There were several people talking, and she was trying to quiet them down.
I thought Fred asked another question. I thought we were answering your question.
Oh, that was the answer?
The answer is, I think it has been. it's
That
not
nothing's
determined at this
planned? Okay. Great.
If these people on Route 75, excuse me, if these people along Route 75, once this road work, would dedicate that property, would that speed the process up? Can they give the property to the state and get 75?
Like a half hour. I don't know, sir. In agreement?
Thank you very much. Mr. Stanley, if I were you, I would rethink the whole plan, rethink what you want to do for Frederick County, who needs more local jobs than they do bedroom communities. You're close to the railroad, a business technology park should be able to give you enough profit to make money. We don't need any more bedroom communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to thank you out.
Anything?
Hi, I'm raising my hand for Amy. She had her hand up.
Oh, sorry, okay.
At one point, the east side was not going to be developed. What changed? It was just supposed to be the west portion of 75. What changed to include the east side?
When we submitted the plan back in 2012, we had shown a plan. We went to a pre-application meeting with the West Side. And the county instructed us to go back and figure out a way to include a larger.
Talk a little louder.
Yeah, we can't
I'm sorry. In 2012, we had a pre-application meeting on this project where we showed a plan to the county prior to submission. It was on the west side only. And at that meeting, we were directed by the county to expand the project to include both sides of the road so that the opportunity for a high school dedication and other things could occur. So it was at that time.
So who the county?
Who was it?
Talking about-
It was at the pre-application meeting attended by us and by county staff.
Is it the Board of Ed that did it, or?
It was the county staff, it was, I remember Eric Soder was there, I believe. Dennis, were you there?
I probably was.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Pretty much, there was a department head, I
But it
believe.
didn't come from the Board of Ed. Did they say that they needed a high school?
The high school symbol is, if we go flip back to the, thank you very much. You can flip back to the master plan, first image. One more. This is the county document. And it has on it a high school symbol. Right here. And So the county wanted to see this included as well in the plan. So it was the county's direction.
And by county, you mean staff who were at that meeting?
Yeah, staff representing the county.
I have one more
What year is that, Matt?
2000, this one is 2011.
Okay, and then the next question, was it considered at all about the roads on 75, both north and south, when you fix it and make it a little straighter? And I know down the road, it's gonna be widened, but what that's going to do to the tractor trailers that will then start using 75 as a major road, and that's not gonna be appealing to anybody, old or young. And 75, if it's gonna be as dangerous as it is now, it's just gonna be a real horrendous mess. Did anybody consider what that's going to do? Because I can't imagine the tractor trailer, and actually I've been told that, at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, the dump trucks and the tractor trailers going down, probably somebody here who told me, they got their Jake brakes, because there's hundreds of dump trucks right now on 80, and that is 75, and this is just gonna, I know that's not your project, that's not the trucks that are powered from your project, but that is what's there now, and when you combine all of everything else, Lansdale, and everything going up county and down county, 75 is a major concern, and it's not all because of Mr. Stanley, it's because all the developments in the area, and the county needs to take that into consideration.
The county has begun establishing an escrow account, which we're contributing, I forget the numbers now. I'm sorry.
So I think
Sarah?
I'm
sorry, I'll speak up, I'm sorry.
But her
I
concern
apologize.
is about the trucks that are now gonna come through, once that bridge.
I understand the question.
the over-
I understand
okay.
the question. Let me address the question.
Mhm.
The county,
Mhm.
in their master plan, wants to create a new road coming from the interchange at 70, coming through the area, so to avoid the curves and the bridge under the railroad. So basically what they have done is started the process by collecting millions of dollars from Lansdale, our development, establishing what's called an escrow account. And so that every project that now comes on board and assigns trips to 75 in the northern portion will have to contribute about $18,000 per trip. So it's getting in the range of probably close to $20 million collected. Now, is it enough to build the improvement? No. But typically, the way the process works is if there's enough money established, that money can be used for design. I don't know why you're laughing, sir. But
it's a fantasy, that's why.
No, it isn't a fantasy. The money that gets collected gets put into a fund. And then eventually what happens is the Federal Highway Administration will look at projects, and this is a high priority project, number 1 or 2 in the county. It just moves.
I have a question.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to answer your question.
It's
So,
not gonna be sufficient, but okay.
well, I apologize, but this is the answer I'm gonna have for you. So what happens is the Federal Highway Administration kicks in about 75 to 80% of that project, where the state and the county would participate approximately 20%. So if that project is a $100 million project, and the county collects 20 million of it, they're very close to working with the Federal Highway Administration to collect the rest of that money. So,
Can I finish my part?
so typically, that's how these large government projects work. That the Federal Highway kicks in the majority of the money, the state and the county kick in the remaining 15-25%.
But it's not a federal highway.
Wait, so we're
The
now.
federal highway still
so
kicks
Now
in.
looking at federal funding, state funding, and county funding.
Towards the larger project,
Right,
not towards
so
this
we're
development.
talking about 75 becoming a major thoroughfare with tractor trailers and a lot.
It's
a lot-
addressing capacity and
And a lot of
safety
cars,
issues.
Mr. Stanley, that's gonna hurt your development and all the developments around, because who wants highway next to where they live, especially, an age-restricted community.
Well, I will say that 75 is the only road that runs between 70 and 270 in the county, so.
That doesn't make it a good plan.
Well, I know, but
We keep talking as a
Sir,
it's actually interstate road.
Sir, in the green, please.
Okay, I have a quick question, then can you go back to, before that, can you go back to the satellite picture, there's something on the
Can you
map.
keep the conversation down in the back, we can't hear the questions up here.
Keep going. That one. What is this, if you can see where I'm pointing, what is this right here? Yeah, the dotted thing. Where am I shadowing? Is that like a proposed road, or I just am not sure what that is?
That's probably the collector connecting 75 and Ed McLean.
Okay. And then, my question was, so we have gone way back and forth about, funding for widening 75, but in regards to the straightening of 75, who's funding that? Is that the state funding it, or are you guys funding it? Where's that funding coming from? For the straightening for 75 over where, like on the other side of 80?
Is this part of the project?
That's this project.
Okay, so it is included in, you guys are funding that even though it's not touching your property?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I can ask a clarifying question of, you said that Lansdale and, Monrovia Town Center, contributing to the state highway funding, or an escrow account? Is it
Escrow
also,
account established by the county and held by the county.
yeah, is it also Linganore and the Newmarket
There's
contributing to
two
that?
more developments
Yes.
going in.
Okay, good.
Okay, so, assuming that are you the ones that are developing a general commercial portion of that property? Or is that not you, you're just doing residential?
we filed a plan on the commercial, it's on the west side of 75 and the north side of 80.
Okay, so with regard to the general commercial, what kind of sightline and light pollution kind of mitigation is the plan? Just because right now it's farmland. I know that it was the drag strip, and that was operating Friday and Saturday nights, and sometimes once in a while on a fundraiser during the week. But if that's gonna be general commercial and there's gonna be shops and things in there, and maybe a grocery store or something, what kind of, like sightline are you gonna provide, or what kind of light pollution kind of filters are you gonna be able to provide so that it doesn't contribute to that?
Yeah, there'll be, the site plan that you'd be talking about filed just for the general commercial. It'll show obviously the integration of the street network as part of the PUD, but county has lighting guidelines, and most likely, probably the lighting manufacturer will come in most recently from CarMax that was just recently built. The actual lighting manufacturer came in, and if you notice, a lot of people were worried they're gonna be super bright. If you drive down there lately, they have them set up on timers, they have a whole new system now. It's just, years and years ahead of what it was before, to control based on time of the day, how much light is on site. There's requirements to have so much spillage off the property. So it would all be part specific to the site plan for the commercial side.
Because this, like over in Urbana, the lights are pretty dim in the parking lot in that giant over there, but it still emits a high point of light that obstructs, obviously it's not gonna be like farmland where there's nothing there now, but I'm just wondering if you can, somehow incorporate large growth trees, things like that, that will help kind of keep the view looking less like a retail establishment.
Less like a town center.
And more like a neighborhood.
Yeah, just recently, the lighting standards, the landscaping standards have all changed in the county zoning ordinance to address those type issues.
Okay, and then my last question is, since the population has changed, the age restriction ratio has changed, has the ratio changed in the mitigation fees that the developer is gonna have to give with regard to, I know that there's been a site proffer for the school, but are there any reduction of fees that are being considered or, changed as a result of the change in the age restriction? And if so, can you tell us what? Because that's gonna make a huge difference as to how much we have to pay for the school that's gonna go in.
In answer to the question, the hard proffers of the property, the proffers off-site, none of that's changed. So the school site, the park site, all the public use sites, the fire site, the water tower site, that's all the same. I believe by virtue of the decrease in the unit counts and then the trips that are generated, there may be some adjustments to the mitigations that are part of the roads mitigation. And again, because that's formulaic, determined by formula, those will decrease. But as far as, most of everything else is pretty much staying the same as far as the proffers from before we were required to revise the plan.
So if we wanted specifics, and I'm guessing that you don't have them, would someone in the county have those specifics?
Actually, the APFO, so we're going to planning commission with the PUD revisions, and then the APFO obviously will have to track how we're revising, how the BSCCs require us to revise the plan. I think we're still working on finalizing the numbers for the APFO letter of understanding. And we've submitted preliminary numbers. Okay, so the county's currently reviewing those numbers. So I'm assuming once the APFO, the Adequate Public Facilities letter of understanding is ready for public hearing, all of those numbers and sort of the delta will be available.
But will it be available, do you know, before the public hearing that's gonna be happening pretty soon here?
It should be. Again, we can't.
Do you know?
It has to be. It'll be available.
And it'll be
Yep.
under the MTC kind of?
Yeah, if you go to the page, the website it's a general, I know it's confusing to get through this website, but there's a point at which you can identify all the PUDs and MXD proposals that are active. And from there, you can look at the concept plan, you can look at the project summaries, you can look at the DRRA, which is specifically where you're going with this APFO LOU. And there's
Google?
Yeah, Google, you know what, I just did that on my phone. It was faster than going through the county's website. All right. So yeah, use Google.
Thank you.
Sir, are you?
Have you considered leaving the drag strip and keep operating it? Because obviously everybody here doesn't mind the drag strip.
That's a question for her then.
I have no interest in continuing to mine.
What about selling it further?
It's actually a historical
For
landmark.
what reason? Why didn't you want to?
Business reasons, you're a business owner, yeah, business reasons.
It's not a cash cow? There's a lot of people that show up and pay cash. I'm sure you don't claim to the IRS all that cash.
Sir, on the end of the gray sweatshirt?
I was wondering if y'all could explain why you need a 25-year DRRA to complete this development.
We did initially, as far as the term for the Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreement, we did initially petition to have the county commissioners grant us a term for 25 years. As part of these revisions, sir, the BOCC essentially imposed on us the condition that we knock back the term of the agreement to be coterminous with our APFO approval. So what we have resubmitted in terms of the revised agreement, the term is now 18 years. Now, I will say on behalf of Mr. Stanley, it's again something that we're not thrilled about, given that the other projects of like size and investment do have the benefit of the 25-year term. But in answer to your question, we would have liked to have had it, and again, just for the reasons of the significant amount of investment and some of those things that you just can't foresee. That's why we would like to have the benefit of that term, but we're the county
There's a
commissioners.
disadvantage to going last.
Well, the county commissioners have directed us to get over to 18. So, and it meant, the reason they went with that is because the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance approval that we will be getting is for 18 years.
Thanks for that.
Kenny?
Practical suggestions about 75. I did this when Blaine asked for, everybody made their suggestions. I did one And then you guys have gone home and made all your decisions and stuff, which is fine, and this is not beautiful either, believe me, I did it the night before.
That's all.
Okay, and I wanted to give one to him too. But what I really wanted to say was, Mr. Stanley, I appreciate your having this community meeting. And I really appreciate that. And I also want to say that two suggestions about 75. One of which is, somebody from the Department of Transportation at VOCC suggested we hold off on doing a connection from McLean to 75 until some of the improvements have been made. You know, that the space would be left for it. I don't know what her name was, I can't remember, but she said something about just waiting before you actually build that piece of road.
Somebody from the county or someone giving?
From the state, somebody giving testimony from the state, it was just one of their suggestions. And that's in here too. I don't remember her name, but it's just a thought, that you leave the spot, you just don't pave it and make it available until 75 is somehow
You
built.
talking about the collector road?
Yes, the access from Lansdale to 75.
There's actually conditions in our LOU that states when that has to be done.
Car-
Lansdale actually has a condition to have it done by a certain unit in their subdivision, which is already been done. So if they get there by that point, it has to be done at that point in their development.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Well, and the other thing I wanted to say is, it would really be nice if the state would give us 262 million, but it's probably not gonna happen. So as an alternative, I wanted to say that, it seems to me, the community's trying to make a compromise in terms of they're not thrilled about this, as I'm sure you know. And you're trying to make a compromise in doing less buildings and getting rid of the townhomes and things like that. And it seems to me that maybe it's time for the county to make a bit of a compromise and stick in some money for 75. And I don't mean, I realize it's based on how much the state gives, and I mean that sincerely, I don't mean that nastily. I just mean everybody's got to give here. And how about if the county, for example, fixes some of those trouble spots on 75 that really need it, that this community can tell you, and which you know.
Building, I'm trying to repeat the question, I'm sorry. The question was, what size lots will be the single-family home, for single-family homes? It's going to be a variety of lots. It's going to be determined at phase 2. There's going to be anywhere from, a small lot near the commercial center, small lots near the commercial center, to larger lots around the perimeter and towards the north of the property as we move away from the commercial. The density and the scale of the lots are going to change.
Could you give us an idea what a small lot is and a large lot is size?
Well, it's going to be determined at phase 2.
Acreage wise.
Acreage.
Quarter acre to 3/4. Right.
It's going to be, there's going to be lots that are going to exceed an acre. There's going to be lots that are going to be very small. There's going to be a variety of lot sizes.
What size is
It's not
small?
gonna be like when you go through Newmarket and you see all of them right next door to each other, is it?
Yes, it will.
Next door to each other.
More than put in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right next
Stormwater, whatever.
Yeah, the plan needs to follow the new state standards for stormwater, which is a combination of.
27 southbound. You don't think that's gonna be impacted? Everybody's laughing. You guys don't have to travel. Everybody here might wanna get to work at a time.
It's backed up from
I was in the
75
back of
to
this
the
every
Masters.
time of year.
It only took me about 90 minutes to get here from Rockville. That's really fun on 270. It's gonna get worse. What do you plan on doing about it? Just packing this stuff in on the countryside makes no sense at all.
Kind of the same deal
Thank you.
for the roads. That's probably more than nine, but you still have farmers who are driving tractors up and down these roads who want to continue farming, and I feel like they're just going to be squished out because you possibly have, city congestion and we also have, school buses that stop on 75, trash, companies that stop on 75, the mail trucks that stop on 75. When you add this many more cars on the road, and you talk about backup, okay, this is more for the county, but you're gonna add this many more homes to this area. Every single day when Urbana middle school that's out, you get backed up into Urbana, and it is gridlock, because the light turns red, and then it turns green, and the people in Urbana still can't go. Still can't go. Your traffic studies from, what did you say, 7 to 9, and then 4 to 6, that's not when the school lets out. You need to go check out the schools when they let out, because you have cars parking along 80, waiting for their middle school children to cross the road in that backup, and you're gonna add that many more cars on the road. That is something to consider. Then when you're going to be pushing this many homes, Lansdale, Monrovia Town Center, Linganore, all those together, just too much. And I'm sorry, Mr. Stanley, that this is happening to you, but it is. And this is the reality that we're fighting. So it's not just against you and your little land. It is our county.
So, what you can do with that, you have to apply with a specific plan. So if I have, 1 acre of R3 or 5 acres of R3, I'd have to come into the site plan, show where the home sites are, how the road's laid out, and meet all the requirements for site development. That would be the equivalent of the phase 2. It's just, it's obviously, since we're on a larger scale, the plans are gonna be a lot more comprehensive.
Do we get any input into phase 2, or is the community?
Yes, phase 2, the phase 2,
Does it have
and
to
I
be
believe
approved like all the rest of it, or is it just happens?
it's just Lansdale's been moving through their process, and as I understand it, again, phase 2, basically, for each section that comes forward, there'll have to be a site plan that goes through the same public notice, posting a property, public hearing, public input, and then, 30-day appeal period.
But the most important part is the agricultural zoning thing, because that gives you permission to build on it.
If you don't have the zoning, there's no right to put in a plan. That's correct.
Which is why this whole thing is important.
Sir, in the blue, is it Stan?
That me? Roy, I know you take great pride in being the farmer, and I applaud you for it.
Thank you.
We would be happy to have you as a farmer. We know you're busy. And in February, I met a young man who identified himself as Frank Gladhill's grandson. He was very proud that Frank bought him a farm. He was maybe 25 years old, and he was farming it in the Hydestown area. So he was making a go at it. And we would like to see some young farmers replace these old farmers. They've worked a long time, they're gray, they're tired. They're going to their winter homes in Florida, their homes in Ocean City, and they've earned a break. But these young farmers need a break. Of course, if you want to farm it, that's fine. You and I talked about it would be nice if you built a cemetery. They make good neighbors. They don't have the problem that all this other brings in. That we do have full faith and confidence in Frederick County planning and zoning and state highways for having no plan. All of these groups are flying by the seat of their pants. The overlying theme is they have no plan for anything. I could build a shit house with more plans than what they have.
Yes.
Do you have a question for me?
Well, actually, I have an answer. My son is a young farmer, and he's sitting there tonight, and I look forward for him farming many years on properties we have.
We would love him to come to Monrovia.
We're already there. We're there.
Farming.
He's there.
And keep farming for his lifetime. Oh, one other thing.
Okay.
Roy, I'm going to pass your house today.
Thank you.
I see you have a big banner that says homes on 1 acre lots. One's being built right next on the southeast boundary of your property. We'd welcome 1 acre lots too with houses.
Why don't you put this next to your house? Yeah. You got 1 acre lot. Put this next to yours.
Sir, in the green shirt in the front?
I have listened to the pluses and minuses, and I've come to this conclusion. Roy, I have no trouble believing that you'll make this project as good as or better than Donnie Pleasantville.
think that's an inside joke.
Yes.
I have follow-up questions, I may go to the map. And maybe Mr. Supersinski can help me with this question, and maybe counsel. This whole thing is one development that's under review by staff, and this whole process has come, right?
No, it's one plan unit
One
development.
plan unit development, okay.
Right.
Now, there's an issue of contiguity. Forgetting about the age-restricted communities now, isn't there a contiguity issue with the power lines and also 75 dividing the property into
No.
three parcels?
No, first of all, the power line is kind of out of the mix now because they've removed everything on the eastern side of it.
Okay.
So that no
Still have
longer factors in, but for the roadway, no, it doesn't break contiguity.
How does it not affect contiguity?
A road doesn't break contiguity, zoning goes to the center line of a roadway.
Okay,
The deeds also go to the center line, or roughly to the center line of that road as well.
okay.
The deeds
So now,
match each other for each parcel.
all right, so, okay, I guess you're saying it's not, that's a matter of debate.
The parcels touch each other, is what I'm trying to say.
Where do they touch each other?
In the road. In the road.
They do in the center of the road? Who owns the center of the road?
on 75. He lets you all drive on it.
That's very nice.
I gotta say,
It's a very good road. That's a state road owned by the state, not the developer. They have a right of way?
The state doesn't have a right of way. It's prescriptive right of way where they allow them to use it on our property.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
all right. Thank you for, now, just real quick, on the age restricted, we have one over here and one over here, and then the community, the broader community in the middle, correct? So, again, I read the law that says that you have to have a continuous community if it's going to be age restricted. So I'm still not clear as to how you can have one over here and one over here with this other broader community in the middle.
If they came in as three separate projects, would they have to be contiguous?
So then are we going to have three separate maps?
No, I'm just trying to explain. If they came in as three separate projects, would they have to be contiguous? If they were, because they would, they could be three separate projects done separately by different builders.
Okay, my
So
question,
it's a similar concept.
so my question is, this is all one big project, correct?
That's correct.
So now we would have to have three maps up here, one for this side, one for here, and one for here?
No,
Is that what we're saying, we would have to have three projects? Or
no, we're not. We're asking for PUD approval. We're asked to show where the location and the number of the age restricted are, which we've done. We've looked at it as two separate communities that will be phased and marketed separately. And that's basically how it's been laid out.
One last question, Holly Hills up by golf course and everything, they're building a new development, and there's some houses on as much as 7 to 10 acres. I've ridden through there on my motorcycle and stuff. And is that gonna be water and sewer? You're referring to the manor of Hollywood? I believe so, yeah. I believe that's well and septic. Okay, but we've been told we can't do well and septic.
That was, the approvals for those, I want to say, are probably dating to like the mid 2000s. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it's probably the last one you see. My recollection is
Crossroads.
they went through the process pretty
Crossroads,
early on,
575
before even 2010, and they're only just getting built out now.
So they're under a different set of rules than what you guys have to operate under now?
Exactly.
I'd be willing to vote to restore those rules.
Sir Rand?
Okay, you've got this divided in phase one, phase two, phase three. Are they going to be built in that sequence in terms of timetable?
No, they're separate communities, but.
Right, okay, but could you define a timetable that,
Generally, the sewer's gonna come from the north on the western side.
right,
Those two communities will start first.
okay.
But there hasn't been a specific determination on the specifics of the phasing.
Speak up, please.
I'm sorry, I must have a cold or something, I apologize. There's, the two communities on the western side will most likely develop under a similar timeframe because they're receiving improvements infrastructure at the same time. The one on the east side will most likely be phased later, but that could change. So that's our.
Okay, and what about the commercial area? How does that fit into the timetable?
Well, to go through the approvals, our site plan is slated to come through the planning board after the approval or PUD, so it just depends on how we get approvals for that. And it also, it depends on the market.
Okay, but again, okay, you said that you're still confined to the 25-year plan that, right, but, well, it was a 25-year plan. Okay, so,
Yeah. Go ahead.
well, I'm just wondering, again, timetable is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, me too.
And that's, I mean, you bring up a fair point, sir, that's the risk, and that's why, you know, the parties that enter into these agreements are looking for as much of a term as they can, because, again, market uncertainty, other uncertainty, we just don't know. The approvals and the agreements can lapse, and you could have not found.
Okay, and what happens if it's not complete after the 18 years?
If the term of the DRA expires, I believe within the terms of the Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreement, you have your approvals, but then basically at that point, once the term's over, I think any
In Montgomery
provisions.
County, they had issues in Germantown where they went over the period. And they let them build anyway. And I'm just curious, if that 18 years is a solid.
That's certainly, I mean, again, in Frederick County, these are the first batch that are coming through. So I don't know that there's precedent in the county to
Well, Tom Natelli had a piece between the high school and the middle school here that he graciously donated to the YMCA, but he had planned that for more units and ran out of APFO approvals. And donated to the Y.
We only have 5 minutes in the room, so I'd appreciate it if we have questions that have already been asked. Ma'am in the yellow?
In case market conditions change, what in your documents keep this age-restricted land from being rezoned to all age community in the future, such as happened in Crestwood Village?
It's not only going to be part of the Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreement, but the actual ordinance, the law that will rezone the property will state in its conditions that 50% shall be age restricted. So basically, the zoning that's on the property embodies that requirement that it be 50%. And the only way to change that would be to go all the way back through and ask for a rezoning again to remove that condition.
But that's 50/50.
Theoretically, but practically, I don't foresee that.
And any traffic that's going past my house, some of it's gonna end up past your house, and where you live.
You're actually getting a lot down there now, some past your house.
People travel through Damascus every day.
Is Howard Payne building in the age restricted community?
You know, I can't say why Howard is also involved in the development, but we don't know, right now, we don't know who's going to get built.
In the front row?
So I just wanted to clarify, because I didn't really hear that question, and then you were talking about the 55 and older, and that was kind of my question. So it was an age restricted at one point, and you asked for it to be an all age. What is the difference between now and before?
The original application in the early 2000s was for an age restricted community. That was granted, but then the project was downzoned. So it was never able to proceed as an age restricted.
Right, but it wasn't age restricted. He didn't come forward with an age restricted. He came forward with an all age.
Correct.
Right. So what's our guarantee that he's not gonna come back and ask for rezoning again? Are you gonna guarantee us that it's gonna be a 55 and older community?
You know, I can't guarantee what's going to happen in the future, but I can guarantee I won't go through the process again.
Thank you. I'm thinking about all of the farmland that is there now and the sensitive environmental areas, the creek and there's some wetland areas back there. There's a lot of wildlife back there that hasn't probably been studied or documented in studies yet. And I'm just trying to figure out, do you have any plans for kind of mitigating the impervious surface runoff and things like that, in terms of like green roofs and native plantings and cluster plantings that are kind of in the common areas that will help absorb the impervious surface runoff?
No doubt. The state gives you a list now of all the different types of treatment methods you can use for stormwater. They don't just want to see a pond. So it'll be a mix of small little landscape infiltration areas, bioretention areas. It's not just regional ponds anymore. So not necessarily a green roof. I mean,
Yeah,
We actually, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna add one other thing. The vast majority of those areas are in the green areas, they're gonna be protected as part of the overall plan. We're proposing that part of this plan. And then, you know, from mitigation, you asked about mitigation, so that,
Well, I understand about the green area that you're saying will be protected, but, you know, there's actual like green housing where, you know, green rooftops and things like that, aside from rain barrels, actually help prevent the impervious surface runoff from even occurring
right, and those are on
into
the,
those other
those are on the
areas.
menu of items that the
Okay.
state has established. There's also other items, so we'll be looking at all of them. But as Chris is saying, green roof is probably not going to work.
We have 2 minutes, I'm gonna take questions from people we haven't heard from in the best.
Clock's 2 minutes fast. Solar time doesn't agree with that.
Sir in the blue vest, you haven't had a question yet, go ahead.
Yeah, we're not getting very many answers, that's for sure. It looks like we gotta go from phase 2, phase 54, phase 99, before we knows what happens with 75. That doesn't make any sense, okay? First of all, we don't want motorhomes, okay? We don't want commercial spaces. You wanna put in single family, 1 acre, fine. Age restricted, fine. But until something's done with 75, as far as a plan, everything should be shut.
Right.
Absolutely everything. Why put this in your backyard?
Well,
Why put it in our backyard?
You know, I tell you, I do a lot of developments, and my backyard was zoned for this, I would put it
You
there.
could have changed the zoning. You could have changed the zoning. Yes, you could have. Just like you're trying to change the zoning here
You're talking about Montgomery County?
in Montgomery County.
We built to the master plan like we're building here. Zoning is
You
changed in
didn't
the
answer
master
me. You
plan.
could have changed the zoning and put this in your backyard.
Next question, sir, in the back with the burgundy.
If we could go back to the map that showed the school locations. Just curious, if I looked at the map correctly, the school was located on the west side of the power lines, and now it's been pushed to the east side?
It was on the east side.
It was the 2011 plan that was on the west side.
Just wait till tomorrow.
There it is.
Go back to that one. It's right by the number 6, is not the school?
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, it's a floating symbol.
Yeah, there's to answer your question, the various community facility symbols, and they could be anything from schools to other public facilities. They're put in on the comp plan in sort of general locations. So it's not, you know, when the county says, well, if we want a school site here, it's a guiding document, and Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, but the vicinity, I guess, is what the comprehensive plan is indicated for the school site.
And I know this isn't regarding that, but am I reading correctly that Lansdale has 2 school symbols? Or had 2 school symbols?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
You see that far?
So, talking further about the high school site, it was in the PUD, now it's not. Previously, when it was part of the PUD, you were planning to provide water and sewer to it, you were going to plan interior kind of connections, minor roadways or such. And now it's not part of the PUD. Have any of those other conditions changed with respect to that site? You're still proffering it? Are you still planning on providing water and sewer for it? Are you still planning on providing the other connections to it?
I don't believe we were originally, even when it was included, Mr. McKay, in the boundary, I don't believe we were initially offering to do those connections. It was simply the dedication of the site.
Which connections, the road or the water and sewer?
Sewer.
I was pretty certain that it was, that your documentation did say that you would offer the water and sewer connections to the high
It
school.
was studied to see about capacity, but it did not say that we would provide it.
Okay, you also said you would make it available to, I think, Green Valley Elementary in that documentation, didn't you?
Again, that was studied to
studied,
see
we
if it
did.
was, the capacity was available.
We studied the capacity. I don't
Your
know
attention,
the
please. The Urbana Library will be closing in 30 minutes at 8 o'clock.
So one
If you need
follow-up
assistance
question once
finding
she's done.
materials this evening, please get information staff at this time. If you need to get a library card or replace a library card, we ask that you take it now. Thank you and enjoy your evening. The library will reopen tomorrow at 10 a.m.
So I guess where I was going to is, what has changed with respect to that property and the PUD other than the boundary? It seems like you've moved the line, but nothing really has changed about the association of that parcel of land to the overall
Yeah,
PUD.
As far as the applicant is concerned, it still has to be dedicated.
Right.
So instead of being dedicated as part of, within the boundary, it would be, I guess, essentially an off-site proffer. But what the county does with it hasn't changed. In other
Okay.
words, we're characterizing it as a public use site, and it's, Roy's dedicating the land, which includes the general commercial zone portion.
Then
So-
why did the boundary change?
Well, it was to specifically address concerns related to this question of contiguity.
Really?
And, I think the county's position was, well, since we're talking about ground that's gonna be dedicated, let's move the boundary and, address those concerns that were raised. And so that's why they imposed that condition, so we revised the boundary accordingly.
Okay, so, but just to be real clear then, there's really nothing that's changed about the relationship to that plot of land, other than that you moved the boundary because you were concerned about
Well,
the
it's not gonna be rezoned.
contiguity issue.
Yeah, and we didn't move the boundary, that was required by the BOCC vote to
Uh-huh.
move the boundary to the west side of the power line.
Okay.
So that property will remain agricultural property, it won't be rezoned?
That's correct.
That's
It
correct.
will keep it zoning.
So, does anybody know what the county has to do to rezone it to build a school on it?
We'll take it up. I mean, that high school, if
You'll
it's,
just do it, you don't have to go through all the same processes as them?
we have to go through a formal rezoning process like anybody else, but it's different than this. We do comprehensive rezoning every time we do an update or a redo of the master of the comprehensive plan. We do a comprehensive rezoning at that point.
So you make your own rules, whatever's beneficial to you.
So is it possible that the county would not rezone this, meaning that the school could not be built there under current law?
There are a lot of things that could happen if the BOCC. No, it's not reasonable to assume that. But, we're not going forward with this as like a hip pocket concept. This has been vetted with Frederick County Public Schools as well. Okay, so we're going to move forward with the school site. They've vetted the location, specific location of this high school site.
The BOE wants that location?
They vetted the specific location recently during this PUD rezoning process. They vetted the general location of the high school symbol during the previous comprehensive plan update.
Just to be clear, when you say they vetted, who's that?
FCPS.
They know about this site, and they
Correct.
said that this site is okay for a high school.
They actually gave more input and they asked for more of the ground, the area over here.
Who did?
Frederick County Public Schools.
No, but who? The board and ed, the
The
superintendent?
facilities division of Frederick County Public
Ray
Schools.
Barnes.
Ray Barnes and his staff, yes.
Okay, thank you.
They went as far as to ask for the site that is currently zoned commercial to be included in the site that Frederick County Public Schools did.
Amy, what were we told something different about that?
What?
Ma'am in the red?
Yeah, the BOE? We were told the BOE asked for
Could
it.
question the other madam in red. I thought there was a movie about that one time.
I have a clarification question. You're the attorney, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned that Mr. Stanley had donated the land for the general commercial. Is he building the general commercial facility as well?
No,
or-
I mean, that Lisa brought up the point that, Ms. Stanley brought up the point that here we have, again, currently zoned property, general commercial. In other words, Mr. Stanley could come in with a site plan today or tomorrow to develop that property for any use that's permitted under general commercial. But by request of Frederick County Public School staff, they said, in evaluating this for the school site, no, give us the rest of that also. So basically, 16 acres of currently zoned general commercial ground. Mr. Stanley is essentially packaging along with that ground for the school site.
Okay, but the rest of the general commercial, are you building into that area or not?
The only other general commercial that this
Yeah.
applicant controls is that notch there. You have other, I guess, in that quadrant as well, there's general commercial property that is not under this applicant's control.
Okay.
This is the quadrant that Mr. Rizzo was referring
Right.
to. This is not controlled by Stanley Trust.
Who controls that?
It's,
Brewster?
Mr. Fuster.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's zone general commercial.
One last question from Teddy, and then we're gonna have to call the meeting, because we have to put the chairs away by quarter of.
In the APFO, this is for Dennis, in the APFO LOU, it would be nice if there were a section committing the county, just like it commits you, to more money for 75 and its improvements, partly also because the county approved Lansdale knowing that this was coming, which is part of why there are so many, the population is such a problem. But it would be nice if that were, since they're revising it right now, it would be nice if that were down in black and white. And also, I just want to remind everybody here to come to the planning commission meetings on March 18th.
19th, 20th, and 26th.
19th, 20th, and 26th at 6 o'clock at Winchester Hall, and then at the BOCC.
Which is April
One more
9th,
question,
10th,
and then
8th,
with
9th, and
if
10th.
you all have any other questions, you can send us on email. And Lisa, give us our email site.
I have a concern of 75 and 355 dump, where it dumps into 355. Right now, it's a mess every morning.
They have no solution for that.
There's no solution for that dump of 75 and 355.
It's in the letter of understanding.
Gets the right
Should
hand
be a letter of
turn.
understanding or
He's building it. He's building it.
And you know, I would like to thank you all for coming here tonight. It's been a very good meeting.
Yeah, that's called Crossroads. Oh, is it? Yeah, yeah.
Don't forget to come to the BOCC.
Yeah, he's building it.
Planning Commission. Planning Commission.